Good evening, Ankita. Yes, so we'll be starting the session. Good evening again, and welcome to the demo lecture 2 of Juris Road. Today, we will be going through the Hindu Marriage Act 1955. So, taking you away from here a bit, starting from Hindu law. So, Hindu law has a divine origin, as we know. It has been there since ancient periods, since thousands of years. Okay, so it has gone through many changes. Earlier, the marriage under Hindu law used to be a sacramental union, it used to be a permanent union, and a religious union. Later on, with time, after the 1950s, in fact, when this act came into force, it started to take the form of a contractual union also. So today we will learn what is the codified part of Hindu law. Again, Hindu law is divided into two parts. One is codified part and another is uncodified part. Under the uncodified part, we'll be learning what is the nature of Hindu law, the scope of Hindu law, how it came into being and existence, what were the Shastras that we followed, how Manu interpreted it, what was there in Mahabharata, Ramayana. We will be learning all those things under the uncodified part. For today, we will be learning the codified part of Hindu law. So, the codified part of Hindu law contains five acts. One is Hindu Marriage Act, another is Hindu Succession Act, Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act, Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act, and Hindu Disposition of Property Act. Okay, so today under Hindu Marriage Act 1955, we will be learning what are the essentials of a Hindu marriage. So the essentials of Hindu marriage is actually mentioned under section 5. So along with section 5, you will be learning section 7 and 8 also, because this is supposed to be learned together. So here you can see what are the essentials of Hindu marriage. Section 5 states that a marriage may be solemnized between any two Hindus if the following conditions are fulfilled. Okay, so there are five conditions after fulfillment of which a Hindu marriage will be considered valid. These are the five conditions. Before going to these five conditions, let's see who is a Hindu under this act. Is it defined anywhere under this act? Anyone? Do you think the word Hindu is defined under this act? No, ma'am. Okay, Aarti, no, actually it is defined under this act. See, under section 2 of the Hindu Marriage Act, it defines who is a Hindu. Not exactly who is a Hindu, but to whom this act applies. Okay, application of the act. So this act applies to any person who is Hindu by religion or a follower of Brahmo, Prarthana or Arya Samaj. Okay. Second, this act also applies to Buddhist, Jaina and Sikh. This act applies to any child who is legitimate or illegitimate, both of whose parents or one of whose parents is a Hindu, Buddhist, Jain or Sikh. Okay. This act also applies to a person who is a convert or a reconvert to Hindu, Buddhist, Jain or Sikh. You need to understand that in this act, entire act, wherever you see the word Hindu, it includes Buddhist, Jain and Sikh also. Alright. However, this act does not apply to Muslim, Christian, Parsi or Jew, and it does not apply to members of any scheduled tribe. Why? Because they are governed under their natural laws. Okay, so going back to the slide, we understood who is a Hindu. Yes, there is a no, it doesn't apply to scheduled caste. It no, yes, Aarti, does it apply to scheduled caste? Yes, there is no, it is not mentioned that it doesn't apply to scheduled tribe or caste. It applies to scheduled caste people also. So coming to this slide, what are the clauses, fulfillment of which, yes, thank you, Aarti. After fulfillment of which a marriage will be valid. So the five clauses are, there should be no spouse living. There should be valid consent between the parties. The bridegroom and the bride should have completed age of 21 years and 18 years. the parties are not within the degrees of prohibited relationship, and the parties are not subindas to each other. So you have to remember this chronologically because it is important to understand the further act. Okay, and you might be asked questions in exams regarding this. So in order to remember this, there is a trick mnemonic that I have learned from my mentor, and I am passing this to you. So this is S C A R S. Okay. Scars. You can remember this as scars. So S stands for spouse living, C for consent, A for age, R for relationship, prohibited relationship, and S for subindas. Okay. This is how you remember this. I'll be asking you in between the class. Okay. Scars. Yes, there is a question, I believe. Yes. Thank you, Ankita. So starting from the first clause, neither party should have a spouse living at the time of marriage. Okay. So section 5 clause 1 says this, neither party includes both bride and groom. Okay. Neither the bride nor the groom should be having any spouse living at the time of their marriage. So Hindu law actually prohibits polygamy and polyandry. Polygamy is when a man has more than one wife, and polyandry is when a woman has more than one husband. So this is totally prohibited in Hindu law, and Hindu law does not recognize this. Hindu law only allows monogamy, which is practiced in India. Okay. This act also has extraterritorial application. What do you mean by this? Extraterritorial application means suppose a man is getting married to a woman in India. Okay. Later he shifts to US and then he marries a US citizen. He says that his first marriage is, he ditches his first wife. So in this case, his first marriage being a valid one, if it is a valid one in India, then his second marriage is completely void. Just because he is getting married outside India doesn't mean that the second marriage will be valid. Okay, when the first marriage is valid under this act, second marriage is totally null and it is void ab initio. What do you mean by void ab initio? It means void from the beginning. Okay, from the starting it is void. So while the first marriage is valid, the second marriage is totally void from the beginning, right? And when you contravene this section, this clause of this section, what happens? The marriage is void under section 11 of Hindu Marriage Act. Okay. Under section 11 of Hindu Marriage Act, you will be studying what are void marriages and what are voidable marriages under section 12. Then this section is supposed to be read with section 17 of Hindu Marriage Act 1955, which prescribes about punishment for bigamy. Okay, it states that under section 494 of Indian Penal Code and section 82(1) of BNS, there will be imprisonment and punishment for bigamy. Imprisonment may extend to 7 years plus fine. Okay, so do you have any idea that there was a case? Do you have any idea about the case where Supreme Court said that, just a minute, we have a question. So, ma'am, wherever the Hindu goes, Hindu laws will follow. Yes, Aarti, you are correct. Wherever the Hindu goes, despite any part of the world, Hindu law will follow him and he will be governed by Hindu law. If he is born as a Hindu, if the Hindu law is applicable to him, then wherever he goes in this world, Hindu law will follow him. Ma'am, do we have to remember the sections of both BNS and IPC? Yes. Yes, Ankita. For now, you have to remember both the sections of IPC and BNS because we will be studying it comparatively under our criminal laws. Okay. So there was a case law where Supreme Court held that if a person converts to Islam or any other religion in order to enter into another marriage, then that marriage will not be valid. Okay. Why? Because we have another question. Is religion different from citizenship? How about a Hindu person who has given up an Indian citizenship and taken US citizenship? Yes, religion and citizenship, I believe, are different things. Citizenship, which we see under our Indian constitution is totally different, and religion is different. Okay, so it is not that a person who is a US citizenship is not Hindu. They might be practicing Hindu. So it is different. Okay. So, coming to the case law, Supreme Court held that when a person converts to another religion in order to enter into a second marriage without dissolution of his first marriage, then that will not invalidate the first marriage. Okay, the second marriage will be invalid if he is entering to another religion. In this case, a person entered into Islam religion in order to contract a second marriage, because under Islam, a second marriage is valid, but under Hindu law, it is invalid. So he did not, stop his invalidate his dissolute his first marriage. So in this case, the second marriage was considered to be void from the beginning. Okay, this was the case that was Sala Mudgal versus Union of India, 1995. So, any questions from this slide from the first clause? Can you all type in the chat box what was the mnemonics that I said in the first slide? Yes, yes, correct. Yes, Aarti, you are correct. Scars, Krishna, you are correct. Preeti, Sandeep, Ankita, yes, you all are correct. That was scars. You have to remember this. Coming to the second clause, which talks about valid consent and sound mind. So, parties to the marriage should be of sound mind and they should be able to give valid consent. Now, can you tell me where is consent defined under our law? Is there any act where consent is defined? Yes, Aarti, you are correct. It is defined in Indian Contract Act, Section 13. Correct. Section 13 of Indian Contract Act describes about consent. It says that when two persons agree to the same thing in the same manner, they are said to have given valid consent. It should be free from coercion, force, misrepresentation, and mistake. Okay. So parties to the marriage should be able to give valid consent and they should be of sound mind. They should not have any mental disability which makes them unfit for marriage or hinders procreation of children also. Okay. Before 1976 amendment, the terms which were used under this clause were idiocy and lunacy. Okay. After 1976 amendment, Supreme Court brought all types of mental disorder under the umbrella and termed it as unsoundness of mind. So unsoundness of mind constitutes all kind of mental incapacity of any nature, okay, which affects the purpose of marriage, and they brought it under this particular terminology. So now it under this act you will find this word unsoundness of mind. Also, there is another important thing you have to notice. At the time of marriage is mentioned in the Bare Act. Okay. At the time of marriage is important because at the time of marriage, the party should be of sound mind and should be able to give valid consent. Okay. After the marriage, like subsequent to the marriage, if the person is becoming unsound, then in that case, this clause will not be applicable. Okay, in that case, other clauses, other sections will be applicable. You can take the recourse of divorce proceedings or judicial separation. Okay, so at the time of marriage is important to fulfill this clause. So contravention of this clause makes the marriage voidable. Now voidable is defined under section 12 of Hindu Marriage Act. So voidable means it will be void at the option of the party. They have the discretion to consider it void or not. Okay. Going to the next slide. The third clause talks about age of parties to marriage. Okay. Parties to marriage should be of a defined age. Under 1955 Act, the was supposed to be of 15 years and the bridegroom was supposed to be of 18 years. Okay. In the first act, which was formed. Later, Child Marriage Restraint Amendment Act came into picture in 1978. Okay, in order to stop child marriages, this act came into picture and it amended the Hindu Marriage Act also. And they raised the age of marriage. The bride's age was increased to 18 years and the bridegroom bridegroom's age was increased to 21 years. Okay. This act also repealed the guardianship provision under Section 6 of Hindu Marriage Act. Probably it was mentioned that the consent of the guardian was required for entering into a marriage. So that was repealed completely. Also, you have to note down that violation of this clause, that is age of party to marriage, if this is contravened, then there will be rigorous imprisonment of 2 years or 1 lakh fine or both. Now, this is mentioned under Section 18A of Hindu Marriage Act. These two are supposed to be read together. So, this entire Section 5, you have to club it with other sections of the Act as well. Okay. So, Section 5, Clause 3 is supposed to be read with Section 18A of Hindu Marriage Act, which says that if this is contravened, there will be rigorous imprisonment of 2 years, fine of 1 lakh, or both. Okay. So, contravention of this clause is punishable. Going to the next clause. Sorry. Yes. Parties should not be within degrees of prohibited relationship. Okay. So what do you mean by prohibited relationship? In the Indian cultural scenario and context, there were certain relations which we thought to be as sacred and holy. And entering into the sanctity of marriage, we thought it wasn't right. So marriage between those relationships were prohibited. Okay, between those degrees of relationship, marriage was prohibited to maintain that respect and sanctity of that relationship. Now, prohibited relationship, this word is defined under Section 3G of Hindu Marriage Act. Okay, that talks about degrees of prohibited relationship. So, we have a question. Which is void or voidable, Aarti? Which clause are you talking about? I think you are asking about clause 3. Yes, clause 3. Clause 3, this is not voidable or void. Okay. Contravention of this clause is punishable only. It is totally punishable. It is not void or voidable. Okay. Because child marriage is not allowed in India. Therefore, it is punishable. Okay. I hope you're clear. So coming back to prohibited relationship. So marriage between prohibited relationships is totally not recognized under Hindu law. Now, what are prohibited relationship under Section 3G of Hindu Marriage Act? Okay. You can see here 3G says about two persons are said to be within the degree of prohibited relationship if one is a lineal ascendant, wife or husband of a lineal ascendant, wife of brother, if two are brother and sister, uncle and niece, aunt and nephew. You know, all these kind of relationships are prohibited. Okay, you cannot marry within this prohibited degree of relationship. In order to simplify this, there is a diagram here you can see. This is a girl, A. Okay, A cannot marry her mother's husband. She cannot marry her grandmother's husband. She cannot marry her great grandmother's husband, and so on. This doesn't end. This line continues. Okay, this degree continues. She cannot marry anyone in this degree. Similarly, in the line of descent, A cannot marry her daughter's husband. She cannot marry her granddaughter's husband. She cannot marry her great granddaughter's husband, and so on. This continues. So they are completely prohibited from marrying within that degree. Now you can see there is an exception to this clause. Okay, if the custom and usage allows and recognizes marriage between these prohibited relationships, then that will be valid. Okay, for example, there are certain parts in India where marriage between a girl and her maternal uncle is recognized. Okay, if that is recognized within the custom, then that is valid. Otherwise, it will be completely void under Section 11 of Hindu Marriage Act. Okay, and it is also punishable under Section 18B of Hindu Marriage Act. So 18A of Hindu Marriage Act talked about rigorous imprisonment. 18B of Hindu Marriage Act talks about simple imprisonment. Contravention of this clause will lead to simple imprisonment of 1 month or fine or both. Okay, any doubts from this slide? Okay. Okay, you are confused about prohibited degree. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ankita. I hope you are clear. Coming to the last clause of section 5, no Sapinda relationship. Now, what is Sapinda relationship? Sapinda means of the same Pinda. Okay, you must have heard about Pindadan that we do to our ancestors. Okay, as a respect mark, as a mark of respect, we make some tribute to them and all. Yes. Yes, when two-person offers pindas to the same ancestors, okay, they are called to be within the Sapinda relationship. Okay, there are two theories regarding this. One is that uh, two persons are said to be connected through a Sapinda relationship when they are connected through funeral oblation of food. Okay, tribute made to the ancestors who had passed away. Individuals who make such offerings known as pindadan. So funeral oblation of food, you must have heard about. When we do pindadan, there is a rice ball that we make, and it is offered with ghee and everything, all the rituals that are followed. Okay, when two persons are doing that to the same ancestor, they are supposed to be connected to each other. Okay, then if they are connected to each other, they should not be entering into the sanctum of marriage. Okay, this is one theory. Another theory is when two persons are connected through particles of one and same body. Okay, if two persons are connected through particles of one and same body, then also they should not enter into the into any kind of marriage. Okay, probably this is why we had a concept of Gotra system in Hindu marriages. If you know about it and heard about it, it is generally said that people of same Gotra should not be marrying each other. Why? Because it is believed that when you are of same Gotra, you are believed to have been descendant from a uh, single sage. Okay, a single sage who was there in ancient period. You are the descendants of them. Therefore, you should not be marrying within the same Gotra. They believe. So marriage is prohibited within the Sapinda relationship. How is this calculated? This is calculated up to 5 generations on the father's side and 3 generations on the mother's side, inclusive of the line of ascent. Okay, what does this mean? You can see here. I'll simplify this. So this is the subject, female. Okay, on her mother's side, up to 3 generations, including her. Okay, this is the first generation, second and third. Up to 3 generations, she cannot marry because this is the Sapinda zone. Okay, this is the male, this is a male, and in this Sapinda zone, she cannot marry. So for on the mother's side, it will be 3 generations, and for the father's side, it will be 5 generations. So you can see here the first generation, second, third, fourth, fifth. Up to this, in this zone, whoever is coming, she cannot marry because this is coming under the Sapinda zone and this is strictly prohibited. Okay. So contravention of this clause, what happens? Marriage will be called as null and void again under Section 11 of Hindu Marriage Act, and it will be punishable under Section 18B of Hindu Marriage Act, which states that it will be simple imprisonment for 1 month or fine or both. It is similar to that of prohibited relationship. Okay. So both will be governed under uh, punishable under Section 18B of Hindu Marriage Act. Okay, so we are done with this clauses of Section 5. Coming to Section 7, it states that there should be some customary rites and ceremonies for completion of Hindu marriage. This is also codified in Hindu law, okay, in the act, that for a marriage to be completed, there should be performance of Saptapadi. Okay, you can remember it like Saptapadi, 7 steps, Section 7. Okay, this is the cue for that. So Saptapadi means taking off 7 steps by the bride and groom jointly before the sacred fire. Okay. When this is completed, a marriage is said to have been valid. So there was a case, Surjit Kaur versus Garja Singh, where Supreme Court held that when a husband and wife are living together without performing any essential ceremonies of marriage, like any ceremony which is important for completion of marriage, if they haven't performed it and they're living together, then the status of husband and wife won't be conferred on them automatically. The marriage won't be considered to have been valid. Okay, it will still be an invalid or incomplete marriage if these ceremonies are not completed. So Hindu Marriage Act also states that there are certain ceremonies which are supposed to be completed, performed to make a marriage complete. Okay. Coming to section 8, it states about registration of marriage. So before 2006, registration of marriage was not compulsory. After 2006, under this case, Seema versus Ashwani Kumar, Supreme Court ordered that marriage should be registered and it is compulsory irrespective of any religion. Okay. So this is the gist of what are the essentials of a Hindu marriage. Section 5 clubbed with section 7 and 8. Okay, any questions? Also, I have simplified this for you and you know made this in a comprehensive manner. You can see what will be the violation, a consequence of violation of clause 1. It will be void and then punishment. So, any questions? I'm open for questions now. Very nicely explained, ma'am. Thank you, Ankita. I hope you all understood what are the essentials of Hindu marriage. You can see in this chart. When will you launch the course of Hindu laws, ma'am? Yes, Aarti, we will be launching the course from 10th of August itself, and we will be starting from the uncodified part. Okay, so we'll be starting from the uncodified part from the scratch itself, and we'll be starting the batch. Any further questions? I hope you all understood what was up in the relationship, prohibited degrees, and what about registered marriages? I didn't understand. Do you mean what about marriages that are, governed under Special Marriage Act? So that will be governed under that act, Preeti. This act we are actually covering today, Hindu Marriage Act. So these are the things which will make a marriage valid under Hindu Marriage Act 1955. Okay. So we will be covering Special Marriage Act separately in our batch when the batch starts. Any further questions? Thank you, Preeti. Thank you. So, we have a few minutes left. Can you all type the case that I talked to you about, where converting to another religion for the sake of entering into a second marriage is not valid? Do you remember the case that I told you about? Yes, Krishna, you're right. It is a Salamudgal case. Yes, correct. And contravention of the clause that talks about child marriage, is it void or voidable or punishable? What do you think? Correct, it is punishable. Do you remember under which section it is punishable of the same act? Okay, it is punishable under section 18A. Okay, 18A. Uh, it is here, you can see this punishment under section 18A. And if the fourth and fifth clauses are violated, it will be punishable under section 18B, okay, of the Hindu Marriage Act. Yes, correct. Okay, that's all. See you in our next class. Thank you everyone for joining and giving your time. Thank you. Thank you, Aarti. Thank you very much. See you in the next class. We will be updating you in the group itself. Okay. Thank you.